Hey guys, welcome to Bitcoin Math. Today we're going to cover the Getting Started in Living a Bitcoin Standard calculator. And if you've already seen this, my apologies. I'm doing an update because I changed a couple of the inputs to make it a little bit easier. So the big idea here is that a lot more people are asking about how do I convert all my income to Bitcoin? How do I borrow those dollars that I need to pay my rent, buy my food, and put gas in the car? And the answer is, well, it depends, right? Because there's a couple different ways you can go about borrowing against your Bitcoin. And we actually detail out some of the different methods here in our strategy guide, borrowing against Bitcoin, because you can do this through a CeFi lender like Salt Lending or Arch or Strike or Ledin or Unchained, lots of options out there. Or you can do it through DeFi, which is completely different. It is a decentralized protocol, and there's borrowers and lenders on each side of the transaction, and everything is governed by a smart contract platform like Ethereum or BNB or Solana or Base or what have you through a liquidity protocol like Aave. This video is not going to go into those details, and the model is not going to specify loan terms or durations or things of that nature. It's going to look strictly at LTVs, liquidation thresholds, and help you plan so that you can bring a more informed approach to this whole concept. Okay, but how you do it, whether you use a CeFi lender or a DeFi lender, is really up to you. Okay, so couple basic terms to cover first and foremost. Number one is loan to value. What is loan to value? Well, it's a simple ratio of loan divided by the value. The loan is how much money you borrowed. So let's say you have a $50,000 loan, meaning you took $50,000 against a collateral value of $100,000. That means your loan, 50K, to value 100K would be 0.5 or 50%. Okay, and the LTVs are going to fluctuate by platform, by lender, by borrower, and your preferences. For this model, though, we're trying to keep it under 50% LTV at the maximum point of this 10-year term that we're going to look at. And the reason why we want to do that is because 50% really gives you some time to respond to margin calls and avoid liquidations. But as a best practice, something at or below 50% is what I would recommend. So liquidation, what is liquidation? Well, there's a lot of FUD out there. And if you don't know what FUD is, fear, uncertainty, and doubt, there's a lot of FUD about getting wiped out from liquidations. Well, sort of. The reason why people talk about getting wiped out from liquidations is because they take on significant amounts of leverage. And the reason why they get wiped out is because if you take your $100,000 in Bitcoin and you find a way to lever that up to $200,000 in Bitcoin using only your $100,000 in value, well, now you've got 2x leverage, right? Your total position is 2x your underlying equity. Well, if you get liquidated and the liquidation fee that you pay for that for the lender or the protocol to convert your assets into stablecoin or to repay the loan or whatever it is, they're going to charge you a fee. And in this example, we're going to look at that fee and assume it's 5%. Okay? So if you've got 2x leverage and you're paying 5%, well, you're paying that 5% fee twice. Right? So of your underlying collateral, $100,000, you're now paying that 5% fee twice. That's 10% of your total stack, right? Now, what if you had 5x leverage? Well, you can just do the math, right? It scales up linearly from there. And oftentimes the liquidation thresholds are not going to be at like a 50% LTV or something like that. So the actual impact on your underlying collateral will be higher as the LTV goes up and gets you closer to that liquidation threshold. So this is why taking on massive amounts of leverage is dangerous, because if you get liquidated, well, the fee is going to cascade and it's going to be a much larger portion of your overall collateral position, and that's what wipes you out. Now, for borrowing against your Bitcoin and living a Bitcoin standard, we're never going to be really above a 2x leverage position, right? You might get to maybe a little more than 2x if you're using Aave, but the further you go up, the higher risk you run of getting liquidated and paying these fees, which will ultimately take out a larger portion of your underlying collateral stack. So for that reason, keep your leverage low. Now, the other thing to call out here are the liquidation thresholds themselves. Okay, on Aave, when you're using wrapped Bitcoin as collateral, they have a liquidation threshold of 78% loan to value. So once your loan gets up to 78% of the collateral value, they will sell up to 50% of that collateral to repay some or perhaps all of your loan balance, and they will charge you a 5% penalty or a fee on all the collateral that they have to sell on your behalf to repay that loan. Now, other collateral types have different fees, like Coinbase Bitcoin has 7.5% fee, and others are going to be different. Okay. Now, if you're using a CeFi lender like Salt Lending as an example, their liquidation threshold is 90.91%. And if you're not familiar with Salt Lending, the liquidation is actually called stabilization because they don't repay your loan. They convert your collateral into stablecoin, and then you basically have to decide what you want to do from there. Do you want them to buy the dip and re-enter your loan position and bring in some more collateral? They basically give you options, but ultimately it's a much higher stabilization threshold, 90.91%, than if you're using DeFi and Aave, where you're going to get liquidated at 78%. So a couple of things to just keep in mind and do some additional education around as you explore this further. Okay, so now we're going to look at, okay, what kind of Bitcoin stack do you need to get the desired LTV to basically afford your lifestyle? Okay, and the calculator is super simple. How much money do you take home after taxes? It's going to say $7,500. What are your monthly living costs? This is bills, this is food, this is entertainment, this is everything. I'm going to say $5,000. And so that we can compare the all-in model, right, converting all your income into Bitcoin, we're going to compare that to a more standard DCA model where you convert some portion of your cash flow after expenses into Bitcoin. For this example, I'm going to say that I convert 50% of my remaining cash flow into Bitcoin. Okay? Annual income growth rate, let's just say I'm making an additional 5% per year. And let's say my expenses are growing at 3% per year. All right? Now, how much Bitcoin do you have? And this is the change that I made to the inputs. Instead of having you key in a collateral buffer, you just key in how much Bitcoin you have. And let's say I've got one total Bitcoin, okay? So what you'll see here too that's gonna auto-populate is that your net monthly cash flow is $2,500. That math is your take-home pay minus your living costs, okay? $2,500. And the DCA model, the standard DCA model, we're gonna convert half of that, 50% of that $2,500 into Bitcoin every single month. And that shows up here. Okay, we're going to assume that the borrowing rate is going to be 10%, and this is also going to show you your total Bitcoin collateral value. It's basically just this number times the current Bitcoin spot price. And lastly, you're going to see this number here, the initial expense cushion in months. What is that? Well, think of that as a collateral buffer, right? So because you have $5,000 per month in living expenses, right, and you've got $114,000 in Bitcoin value, well, how many months worth of collateral is that if you were to just divide your Bitcoin value by your month's expense cost? Well, it's 22.86, and that's going to play into the equation here. So what do we think the Bitcoin CAGR is going to be for the next 10 years? I'm going to go ahead and say Saylor base case. Okay, so once you do all of that, the magic will happen, and the top chart is going to be the all-in model. And what you're going to see here, the big orange curve here, the arc, that's going to be your loan to value ratio over time. You might be wondering, well, why does it change like that? Well, it changes for a couple of reasons. Number one, you are buying $7,500 worth of Bitcoin every month. Okay? And you're only borrowing $5,000 against your stack every single month. So that means that you're only borrowing at whatever that is, 75% or 66% LTV every month. Okay? Now that's higher than the LTV that we want, but remember, you are starting with a nice buffer, right? You've already got 23 months worth of collateral value that you're starting with here. So that's why you see that this max LTV is only 32.77%. And that happens here in, what is this? Month 34. So if all of these numbers played out, Bitcoin grew exactly at that amount, etc., then the max LTV you would ever hit would be about 33% and then start coming down. Now, the reason why it comes down like that so sharply is because you're continuously stacking more Bitcoin every month, adding to your underlying collateral, and the collateral that you're starting with is continuing to appreciate at 29% compounding annually. So eventually that 29% catches up and starts increasing more than the amount that you're borrowing against it in any given month. And as a result of that, it starts to bring your LTV down instead of pushing it up. Okay? So let's now compare these two scenarios. Okay? If you're just buying $1,250 per month in Bitcoin using a standard DCA model, then you're going to acquire 0.55 net new Bitcoin over this 10-year period. If you do the all-in model and convert all of your income to Bitcoin, you're going to accumulate another 3.22 Bitcoin over this 10-year period. And the difference here is roughly $4 million in value. And then sure, you've got to pay a $1 million loan, or you've accumulated $1 million in debt, or you've paid $1 million in interest, however you want to think about this. But your ending net value is roughly $5.1 million versus $2.2 million if you were to just do a standard DCA model after accounting for expenses. So if you're familiar with our models, we provide a TLDR summary here. I encourage you to read that. Because it kind of synthesizes everything into a brief little paragraph, and also toy around with this, right? Because if you're super bullish on Bitcoin for the next 10 years and you think it's going to be a Saylor bull case, notice how everything changes, right? Your max LTV goes down, the max LTV month gets pulled forward, and this gets much steeper, much faster. And the reason why is because while your collateral is now appreciating even faster, meaning that the benefit of the appreciation is showing up even sooner, right? If you think Bitcoin is going to do closer to 50%, again, the peak of that gets pulled forward and starts coming down much more aggressively. If you want to model this more conservatively, you can do that as well, and you can see how that impacts the chart. The other thing that I would encourage you to do is play around with how much Bitcoin you have. So if you've got 1 Bitcoin or you've got 2 Bitcoin or whatever that is, right, you can come in here and toy around with this and see, well, how does it impact all these numbers depending on how much Bitcoin I bring to this scenario, right? I'm a big fan of keeping your Bitcoin in cold storage and keeping it secure. And if you decide to borrow against it, well, bring what you need to your loan provider or to your DeFi protocol of choice. Keep the rest of it in cold storage, but be comfortable and be familiar with how to move that Bitcoin into your collateral wallet or into the liquidity protocol if you need to respond to margin calls or you want to borrow additional funds or whatever it is. But that's really it. If you have questions, you can certainly reach out here. You can leave feedback if this is confusing or you have suggestions, let us know. Appreciate your support. And with that, we'll see you on the next one.